Yay, broadcast!
Are we live yet?
We're totally live! Ready? Here's the intro. Welcome to the Iron Sysadmin podcast, your source for IT news, commentary, and a healthy dose of paranoia. Awesome! Iron Sysadmin podcast, episode 14. Right? Yes, 14.
14, yes. We've been doing this for 2 weeks.
No. Well, I guess.
14, that's 2 weeks.
2 weeks if we were to record every day, sure. Wow, that seems really pitiful, doesn't it?
But the Associated Dresden book pretty much fits the weather lately.
Oh, cold days, right?
Cold days, yeah.
Cold days. Cold indeed.
Freezing, in fact. What do we got? We got the Winter Court. See, you can't really tell people what's going on in this book because it gives away what happened in the previous book.
Every book from here on out we can't talk about because it ruins all the stuff that happened in book 12.
Look, everyone, you have to read this series. It's vitally important.
Absolutely.
We can't talk about it unless everybody has read it.
Everyone go read it.
Incredible.
And then you can get to the point where we are and just biting our nails, waiting for Jim Butcher to write the next book. Because from what I hear, he started writing it now. It's been 2 years, I think, since the last book was released. He's writing it now.
This book has Cat Sith in it. And He Who Walks Behind. I'm sorry, He Walks Before.
Yep, and Santa Claus?
Was Santa Claus in this one?
Oh, I thought you were talking about the series in general.
No, Santa Claus isn't in this one.
He's in Cold Days. He's in Cold Days.
Is he?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's possible.
Yep. In fact, I think this is where we find out who he is.
Oh, maybe that's why. Okay.
Yep, the whole dual identity thing. Yep. Yeah.
Spoilers.
Well, I didn't say who Santa Claus is, other than Santa Claus. I mean, of course, he's in the book called Cold Days, Winter, Santa Claus. Come on.
True. True.
Anyway, I have a tasty chocolate milk stout.
Yes, I'm slightly jealous. Although I do have a wonderful Stone Hop Revolver IPA.
Hop Revolver. Does it revolve?
Well, I guess the Hop Revolver, each one of these, I guess they rotate the hops that they use to make them.
Oh,
so this one is loaded. This one is loaded with Mosaic hops.
Mosaic hops.
Yep. So we're gonna crack this one open.
Is that like the predecessor to Netscape hops?
Maybe. Are you full of exploits?
Talking to your beer.
So this one is coming on right after I've just finished a Stone Ruination, which is also a wonderful IPA.
Ruination.
Yeah.
This is going to be a fun podcast. So, full disclosure, guys, I'm coming off a long, dreary, cold weekend of jeeping, and Jason is coming off a long weekend of moving lots of heavy things from one residence to another, and we're both drinking.
I have spent the last 4 days moving things from one place to another. I am so tired.
Well, we can elaborate. We can elaborate all you want when we start our little chat. How about we get into the news? We'll get the stuff that requires some thought out of the way first, and we'll cover the main topic after we've had a few drinks.
Oh, excellent. That's the way I like to do things.
Exactly.
All right. So
Tavis is making all of our lives miserable again, or better.
Well, I mean, for those of us that have to deal with Windows, maybe.
Maybe you do. Well, you have Windows desktops, don't you?
Yeah, but I mean, yeah.
Pretty sure they're not connected directly to the internet, though.
No.
I mean, Windows
No.
should never be connected directly to the internet, in my opinion.
What's the current what is it, 13 seconds or 23 seconds or something like that to exploit a unpatched Windows? Well, I don't know about Windows 10, but previous versions of Windows it was like 13 seconds and you got exploited.
I have no idea. I know it's probably terrible though. I know from experience that it's pretty terrible. At least I don't know, 15 years ago, the last time I set up a Windows box that I wanted to connect to the internet. Yeah, it wasn't pretty. I almost got my internet service turned off because of that. Freaking code red.
So, Tavis, better known as the guy who went and took a shower and came out and broke LastPass because he had an epiphany in the shower. I
don't get anything that great done in the shower except getting clean.
Has apparently working with, I'm guessing this is a colleague, and I quote, just discovered the worst Windows remote code exec in recent memory. This is crazy bad.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the reports I read, I don't know if it's in the one that we've linked. So the one we linked is from the Hacker News. It was the first article I came across that was written up well enough to link. But basically they say that it's likely that this can be turned into a worm, and it's crazy nasty.
Right. So you do not need to be on the same network as the victim. So it's remote. It's a remote hack, and it works against default Windows installations. So, ouch. So the way this works now is this is the Project Zero stuff from Google. So they disclosed this to Microsoft. Microsoft has 90 days.
Yep.
And after 90 days, Google will release all of the information about the flaw to the world, regardless of whether Microsoft fixed it.
So we're all looking forward to that.
Yeah. Well,
honestly, most of us are probably looking forward to a patch, and then looking forward to hearing about what this is.
Right. So, I mean, they're not horrible. Microsoft apparently released a patch. Oh no, I'm sorry. This was the Edge browser one. But Microsoft hasn't responded to this one yet. But the expectation is that this month's Patch Tuesday, which is tomorrow, will hopefully have a fix. Otherwise, we got to wait until June.
Yeah, but that'll still be within the 90 days. So,
yeah.
I mean, win-win.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, but now, I mean, the fear is that now that people know that it's there,
people are going to be looking
working on it.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, that should be great. So fun. All right.
It's Windows.
We can move on to the next thing, which is from Fortune, which will play a video unless you're in the right phase of the moon where the video doesn't work right. On this machine, it happens to work right. I had to go through great pains to make it not play over top of the dang podcast. Anyway, millions of Android devices could be secretly spying on users.
Alert.
So that sounds like
clickbait.
That's like a very loaded title. Okay,
yes,
because
it's called clickbait.
Because
title.
We all know that Android devices are listening all the time in order for their OK Google to work. Oh no, I said it. Hope nobody. I'm gonna have to filter that out. Otherwise, they're gonna be able to unlock my phone.
Okay, Google, order me a dollhouse.
Yeah, I don't think it works quite like Amazon does. So anyway, this is not Android itself. It's actually that they have found 234 Android applications that are apparently in the Android store, which contain this piece of code. There was a name for it, Silverpush.
Silverpush.
Which apparently listens for ultrasonic signals that are embedded in media or emitted by beacons. So think about that. Stuff you cannot hear that is embedded in media or beacons. So beacons, is that like I walk into the Burger King and next to the door is a beacon that's emitting this thing I can't hear that my phone can hear?
Yes. So this is this is absolutely fascinating because
It
this
is
is something I've thought about. Well, I mean, this is something I thought about for a long time now. All these devices are listening.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots of frequencies that we can't hear that these devices can.
Mm-hmm.
Why not use them to transmit all sorts of information all over the place? And this is exactly what this thing is doing.
Yeah, that literally is exactly what this thing's doing. So basically, they found certain apps. Not there doesn't appear to be a list of said apps in this article, unless you subscribe to some feed that they're pushing. But anyway, they don't seem to imply that any mainstream apps that most people are using, like Facebook or whatever, are doing this. But they did list things like McDonald's and Krispy Kreme in the Philippines. So there's that. But anyway, these apps have this little, I don't want to call it a backdoor, but this little piece of code that'll just listen. And when it hears these signals, it'll do things with them. Whether it's just simply like, oh, they went to McDonald's, or, somehow identify like, hey, that person heard a Krispy Kreme commercial, right?
Krispy Kreme.
Yeah, I know, Krispy Kremes.
Now I'm hungry.
Man, if I start getting Google ads for Krispy Kremes, I'm going to throw my phone away, go back to a dumb phone. I'll be the one with smoke signals. Listen to this. So
okay,
anyway,
for all of you out there, that's a hack challenge. So what we need to do is take out his phone so that it starts talking about Krispy Kremes all the time, because I really want to see him use smoke signals.
I'll send you. We'll record the podcast with smoke signals. That'd be awesome. So yeah, kind of weird, fascinating, but weird and almost scary, to be honest. The fact that some app install can be tracking me in such a way that they can actually figure out where I've been, not just based on location, but based on like actual evidence. What ads I've heard. That's creepy stuff.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, most of what we're doing online is trackable. So
yeah.
I mean, this isn't in the show notes, but there's a podcast called On the Media. I'm sorry, not On the Media. Note to Self. There's a podcast called Note to Self. And one of the recent episodes I just listened to was a lot of people exclaiming lots of shock about how much information they can pull out of a single photo. Just in photo. So your phone, by default, loads this thing with metadata. You've got GPS coordinates, the type of phone, the date and time, and then after that, you take that photo and throw it into Google Images, and it will tell you all sorts of information about that. So if you happen to have that photo or a similar picture of yourself linked in, Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, it's going to identify you. So, the expert that they had on was able to take a simple photo and basically identify who the person was, where they were, when they took the picture, what was going, like the weather that day. Like, I mean, the amount of information there is astounding. So
there it is.
It's not really a surprise.
Do you see in my camera settings right here?
Those
two little toggles at the top.
Oh, to turn off. Yeah, sure.
Yep, location is turned on by default. That's getting turned off.
Yep.
Yep. That's one of the first things I do to a phone, but I've recently had reason to reinstall my phone, and it got turned back on.
Even turning that off does not guarantee that you can't be tracked, because if you post a photo that is anywhere near a common, photo taking spot, you throw it into Google search and it'll match the area.
Oh yeah, it'll base it off
all sorts of information. Yeah,
right. Mm-hmm. But yeah, location tracking in your photos has been a problem for a long time. I mean, I can remember I was at some sort of a family gathering, and a family member who was not necessarily technical. They're technical enough to like not be fumbling with their smartphone, but not technical like us. And she came up to me and she's like, "Oh my God, I read this article about how like people are figuring out where your kids' bedrooms are based on pictures you took, while you were playing Legos with them." I'm like, "Yeah, that's been a problem for a long time." She's like, "Oh no, how do you fix it?" And I showed her how to turn off the location tracking and whatnot in her phone, and she was better about that. But yeah, it's sort of eye opening when like random relative comes up to you because they know you're that computer guy, and they've
You
heard
know how
about
to
this.
computer, right?
Yeah, they've heard about this security flaw, and they want you to help them fix it. Right? That's just not something that happens frequently. So yeah,
Well, and
it's sort of
it's not necessarily computer flaws. It's mostly like, I heard this horrible, shocking thing,
right,
and I
right,
don't want it to happen to me.
right, right. So, all right, moving on. Android is listening. Not Android. It's apps on Android. You know me. I like my Android, even though I know
Yep.
it's probably listening to me right now. Okay, so did you get my Google Doc?
Yeah, I answered it, and I mean,
All of a sudden, someone started sending mail as me.
I don't know. It was weird. I mean, it looked right. It looked just like Google.
It looked just like it came from you. It was even a Google link, man. So Forbes is just the first link I found about this, but even though it was everywhere. So
Yeah, that's pretty big.
Yeah, definitely. So what was it? Last Wednesday? Tuesday? It was last week sometime. Let me look at the date on this thing. May 3rd. It was May 3rd. May 3rd was last Wednesday. So last Wednesday I was at work, finishing up a few things because Thursday and Friday I was off for my aforementioned Jeep trip. And I start getting these reports from all over our user base of these Google Doc suspected phishing emails, right? So I start looking at them, and they look, they have some of the classic signs of phish with, misspelled words, bad wording, things like that. But the link they send you to is an actual Google link. So I start digging a little deeper, and I'm like, man, what is this thing? Because it's obviously phish, but it takes you to a Google link. What's the angle here? So I copy the link out. I paste it into a bash shell because I know that's relatively safe. And I'm looking at the link, and it's like it goes from Google Docs to, or is it Google Drive, I think. And there's like all these, URL arguments thrown in there. And all of a sudden I see this thing that says OAuth. And I'm like, oh, this looks bad. So it's basically going through Google or through Google Docs and calling like Gmail, and then like through OAuth and through, I forget what the last piece of it was, but it just like this long chain. It looks like a valid URL because to the average person, it's just like gibberish, right? They expect this thing from Google links. And in the end, it turned out that what this thing's doing is it's actually granting permission for the attacker, or actually for some application that's using the OAuth or using the Google API. It's granting them permission to your Gmail account in the end of the day. It's like, holy crap. Like, that's pretty damn sophisticated, correct? Back me up here.
Yeah.
Come on, you're supposed to be talking.
Yeah, they've gotten better. They've definitely gotten better. So this is very simply an OAuth attack. So they were after OAuth credentials, or not even credentials. They're just after the OAuth token, so they can do stuff with your account. Because they don't need your username and password at that point. You've granted them permission to do whatever they want.
If you've granted them permission, which people are used to clicking through.
Yes.
Right. So how many apps do you install on your phone, or click through in your browser that ask like, oh, can I have permission to do this thing? And you're like, oh yeah, I just want to get this done. So go ahead, do your thing. Or, maybe you read through it, but half the time, if it's a Google app and it looks like another Google app that's trying to do it, you're probably going to trust it. Right. And in this case, it was really crafted to look like it was Google asking you to do a Google thing. So, I mean, good on the users that reported it to me. I don't know that any of our users actually fell for it, though I don't think there's any way that I would have known, simply because we don't use Gmail.
Right.
But, maybe they could have gotten access to their personal Gmail account. But again, that's not really my problem. not to be callous to their problems or not, but there's no way I would know that it happened, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a whole bunch of information about a lot of this. I mean, they're trying to relate this to the Russians, and then there was
of course, because we have to make that link. Is it maybe North Korea?
Yeah, maybe. I think North Korea and the Russians are working together on it.
Oh, maybe. Maybe it could be.
So Google came out and said, guys, this was bad, but look, only 0.1% of our users were affected. It's not that big a deal.
0.1% of like how many billions of people?
Yeah, right. Turns out 0.1% of Google users is over 1 million. So, that said, apparently they fixed it in like 30 minutes. Yep. So, I mean, Google did a good job taking care of it. Took them like 30 minutes. And I guess it's okay now.
Yeah,
it blew up pretty quick though.
Yeah, it did blow up pretty quick. They fixed it pretty quickly, which was, good on them. But yeah, definitely a very crafty and sophisticated thing.
They're getting better. I mean,
they're getting better. I mean, they found an exploit, not an exploit. I don't know if you even want to call it an exploit. They found a flaw in Google's OAuth mechanisms, is what it comes down to.
Right.
So,
well,
I mean, yes, they're getting better, but they just found another flaw and they were trying to exploit it.
Right.
So, anyway, you ever copy a DVD? For strictly backup purposes.
Yes.
Yeah, so you've probably
it allows me to stream my all of my movies straight from my drive instead of having to put the stupid DVD in each time. That's all.
Yeah, so I mean, regardless of the legality of copying DVDs, a lot of us do it so that we can store our DVDs in a digital format instead of having to hunt for a disc every time you want to watch your movie. You can stream it to a Roku or a Plex device or whatever you want to do, right? So you may or may not have used a tool called Handbrake to do this, right? I mean, that's a pretty popular tool. It's
Handbrake is wonderful. I love Handbrake.
It makes converting media, whether it's from a DVD or from another movie source, just dirt simple. You tell it where the source is, you tell it what you want to re-encode it to, you click a button, and it just goes.
To be clear, Handbrake themselves will tell you, Handbrake is not for ripping DVDs. It's purely for converting from one codec to another.
Yeah. It just happens that it just happens DVDs to be able really to freaking well. They're just covering their ass. But anyway. So I believe there were dates in this article, but from Ars Technica, there's this nice little article about somebody apparently got into the download site for Handbrake, which was like downloads.handbrake.fr, and uploaded an infected version of Handbrake. It's infected with some sort of spyware. There was a name for it in here somewhere. Over a 4-day period ending Saturday, download mirror located at download.handbrake.fr, delivered a version of DVD, blah, 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 back with a backdoor known as Proton.
Proton. Hey, hearing you rapidly read that to yourself was,
good.
That was great.
I'm just trying to not be here silent while I'm reading, So anyway, if you downloaded Handbrake sometime between, let's see here, when was Saturday? Saturday was the 6th, and they said 4 days
to May 6th.
So from the 2nd to the 6th. If you downloaded Handbrake from the 2nd to the 6th, or updated Handbrake from the 2nd to the 6th, you probably want to just nuke your machine from orbit. Oh, Mac only, apparently, according to this article. You probably want to just nuke your machine from orbit and restore from a backup from before the 2nd, because this is apparently nasty stuff, which is difficult to clean out.
There's a bunch of caveats and bits here. So if you're updating from anything prior to version 1, you could be infected. It's a 50-50 chance. anything after version 1 actually used cryptographic signing, so it won't install a non-signed or an unsigned binary. So if you already had version 1, you're good to go.
Well, this says anyone who's installed version 1.0.7 should check the checksum.
Yeah, I mean, check anyway, but according to previously in the article, versions 1.0 and later weren't susceptible.
Oh, yeah, right there it says it. So basically, older versions of Handbrake. That's weird.
Right. Well, older versions would auto install or could be updated to the bad version because it didn't check. But
okay.
If you're running Handbrake and you've updated lately, it's probably worth checking. Yeah,
I would say. They didn't really go into detail as to how to detect Proton, or did they? And I missed it. I don't know.
There's you can check the SHA-1 of your version.
Yeah, right.
And if you they have the version number in here. Basically, if it ends in B274, the file is malicious. That's bad. Delete it. Nuke it from orbit.
So checking the SHA-1 sums on downloads is generally a good idea anyway. But I know a lot of people don't do it. I know I don't check every single download. I mean, it's just it's work that you probably don't think you need to do until something like this happens, and then you're like, "Damn, I wish I'd done it." All right, so that about covers the news. I think maybe you've got an announcement to make. You went and like moved or something, didn't you?
Yeah, I have a new, I guess a new undisclosed location. Look, see, new office. Notice boxes.
Anybody watching the video? Which, you know, I don't know if there's anybody watching the video. I saw Dustin in there a little while ago. I don't know if he still is. Anyway, anybody watching the video, tell me what color the wall behind Jason is. Because we had this little debate before we started broadcasting that it's one color, and he says it's another. So
I'm telling you, you're wrong. I'm sitting right here.
Maybe in person it's one color, but I'm telling you, on your video camera, it is a totally different color. Unless it's my monitor, which is possible.
I'm gonna say it's definitely your monitor.
I think to be safe, you should paint the walls.
Because I don't have enough crap to do with.
Yeah. I mean, moving isn't enough. You have to also paint.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to make the office your own, right? It's important. I think it's important. Whatever. All right. So in other news, maybe you've heard about this conference called DerbyCon. Tickets are totally on sale now.
Nope, they're gone.
But if you didn't know that, you don't have one. So yeah, tickets went on sale Saturday at 12:58 or 12:55 or something like that, when they were supposed to go on sale at 1. And by the time they were supposed to be on sale, they were already sold out.
Gone. Yeah, they sold out in under, I don't know, like fast, really fast.
Very fast. Someone said 2 minutes. The guy who was buying my ticket told me, so he was basically, he relayed the whole story to me when I got back to work on Monday or today. He's like, yeah, I was on my exercise bike and I had the notification set up on my phone, and the notification came in and I hit the cooldown button on the exercise bike, which takes 3 minutes. He said, by the time the cooldown finished and I walked to my computer, they were sold out.
See, so not dedicated enough.
I mean,
the guy who bought my ticket had
You mean the guy who bought our tickets? Because I had to depend on you and your coworker to get me a ticket.
So he had a Mac and a Windows machine, both set up, ready to go, and whichever one got there first, he was going to use.
Yeah.
So the announcement came out, he refreshed both of them, and they both hung.
Oh, God.
Just sat there loading. So he jumped on his phone, went to the website, which loaded right up on his phone, and bought 2 tickets.
Awesome. And
then at 1 o'clock, because some people understand how time works and like, do things at the proper time. At 1 o'clock, the rooms opened up and sold out just as quickly as the tickets.
Yeah, I heard they sold out pretty darn quick too.
So I have not figured out whether I get to be the big spoon or the little spoon. But apparently we have one bed.
Oh God, no.
So one of us will be sleeping on the floor.
The fun, which is DerbyCon. This is turning into like the next ShmooCon, isn't it?
Well, whatever. I mean, well, yeah. I mean, I guess there's a lot of very upset people.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
I mean, I have been, since the first DerbyCon, I have been like on top of trying to make sure that I'm there to get tickets.
Yeah,
every single year because I've been waiting for this.
They used to go on sale at midnight, and you'd stay up till midnight to order the tickets, and then they'd be on sale for the next 6 months.
Right. Yep.
So your midnight ticket ordering was completely wasted, but now it pays off.
Totally justified.
Yeah, you were just a trendsetter.
Yeah, this time around I had a coworker who was super dedicated and spent a lot of time sitting there waiting patiently for this thing to open to get tickets, because DerbyCon decided to release their tickets on the day that I was moving. Thanks, guys. So I was a little busy.
Yeah, I know. What the heck, right? Yeah, like 2 weeks ago, I realized that DerbyCon ticket day was on the same day as the second day of the Jeep Jamboree, which I volunteer at. So yeah, at the point where your coworker was frantically trying to order tickets, I was crawling my Jeep over a pile of coal.
You're supposed to burn that, not crawl over it.
This is discarded coal that doesn't burn.
Oh.
So yeah, I mean, thankfully, your coworker, who I won't name on the air unless he tells us in the chat that he wants to be mentioned.
Double D.
Double D.
It's Double D.
Okay, good enough. Double D.
Double D.
So I'll have to thank him in person that he was able to get tickets for all three of us. You said 2 tickets. You meant 3, right? Because 2.
No, so
2 doesn't work.
Right. So okay. So previously, I think it was the week before. It was a couple days or the week before. Dave had opened up a short ticket sale test.
Yeah, that was
so
also when I was not available at a computer. Damn it, Dave.
So he jumped on and got himself a ticket, and then immediately texted me and said, "Hey, tickets are open. Jump and get one." And in the 3 seconds it took me to get there, they sold out.
Yeah.
So
why did you bother calling me then? Didn't you figure they were going to be sold out by then?
I told you because I was trying to be a good friend. I'm like, hey, tickets are on sale.
So you called me before you tried to order a ticket.
Yeah, I did. I'm like, hey, tickets, and then they were gone. So he got his ticket early. He told me later, he's like, yeah, I only ordered one. I should have ordered more than one. I didn't see the button to order more than one. I just kind of panicked.
Ticket,
went, whatever.
Ticket.
Like, whatever, it's okay. We'll get them later.
It's like money floating in the air, right? Everyone's just ripping around. Ticket.
Right. So he picked up the ticket for me later, and I told him, let's get more than one just to make sure. That way, we know other people who want to go, and if they are not able to obtain the tickets, then we have an extra. So the tradition or the
I'm sure you would have been able to get rid of it even if I had gotten a ticket.
Well, look, the ticket. So the as far as I'm concerned, is a tradition. But I guess Dave was saying today that there's something in there in the fine print somewhere. If you have a DerbyCon ticket and you're not going to use it, you sell it for face value.
Yeah.
Or less.
Yeah, I saw him
The
tweeting about that.
exception, right? The exception is if you're auctioning it off for like charity.
Oh, right.
You know, that's sort of a
Yeah.
different thing. But if you're just selling it, like selling it for a higher value is not something that, you know, it's frowned upon, I guess.
Right.
I never really thought of it that way. I just thought of it as like, you know, it's sort of a family. So we kind of just, I have a ticket, I can't use it, you know, we'll get rid of it and we'll pay whatever the face value was.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But we got our tickets. I think we're ready to go. Now, for those of you who didn't get tickets, apparently not all is lost. Dave is working on, I don't know, there's a flurry of tweets today from him about all the code that he's working on and everything else.
Yeah, he's improving the ticket purchasing system because apparently if you went to DerbyCon's website and ordered a ticket or several tickets, and then went through the payment procedure through PayPal, and the tickets sold out in the, you know, while you were entering your payment information, after you clicked submit on the payment, you'd come back and it would say, nope, there's no more tickets available. And that happened to people. So apparently Dave's been working on improving the mechanisms between his site and PayPal so that if you added tickets to your cart, they're there and reserved for you for X number of minutes. I think it was 5 minutes he was talking about. So that should give you time to put in your payment information, and your tickets will still be there after you put in the payment, which makes perfect sense.
That's exactly what happened to me in the first round when he was testing.
Yeah. You should have mentioned it to him. Maybe he would have had it fixed.
Yeah, I just assumed that, you know, that's the way it was working. So okay, that's cool. But he did say that there would be tickets that were going to be released slowly over, I guess, the next couple of months.
Yeah. So
it sounds like there's more tickets.
There's also the submit a talk option, which in the past has generally netted you the ability to buy a ticket even if your talk was declined. Now, I'm not saying that everybody and their brother should go submit a talk, but you know, submit a talk that's worth submitting, and maybe you'll get accepted and be able to talk at DerbyCon and get a ticket out of that as well. So,
and fair warning, guys, submitting a talk about how submitting a talk gets you a ticket has already been done.
Yeah, it worked last year. I still haven't watched that talk. I want to go back and watch it and see how it ended up.
Heard it was pretty good. So
yeah. So I was considering actually submitting a talk anyway, either about the topic that we're going to discuss tonight on this show, or perhaps about the new Derby project. So I don't know. I may or may not do that. The one thing I don't want to do is submit a talk and make it look like I submitted a talk to get a ticket.
You have a ticket. All right, everybody, he has a ticket.
I feel like that's
talk
cheap.
now. Well, I mean, if you have a talk, then talk.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth submitting. I mean, I talked about the original Hack My Derby project at DerbyCon 5. Was it 5? Yeah,
I don't remember.
This is 7 now, right? This year. So yeah, it would have been 5.
Yeah,
because 6 was Hack My Derby.
Right?
So, yeah, so I don't know if I want to go into details as to what I'm building for the next DerbyCon. You can all be surprised. If you want to know about what I'm building for the next Hack My Derby, follow at Hack the Derby. Yes, I know it's confusing that I didn't call it Hack My Derby. I don't know what I was thinking. At Hack the Derby on Twitter. So, yeah, you can. I will eventually be releasing what I'm doing, or I should say what we're doing, because there's a few of us this time around, because it's going to be more of a community thing. It's not so much a keep this a big secret and unveil it at DerbyCon like it has been in the past, because if others don't participate, it's not going to be as cool as I want it to be.
Right. So details will be coming sooner rather than later.
Details will come as soon as we figure out what the heck we're doing. Or how we're going to do it. We kind of already know what we're doing.
We know what we want to do. We just have to figure out how to do it.
Figure out if it's possible. And write a bunch of code to make it happen.
Anything's possible.
I don't know why I do this to myself.
Because you're bored?
Like I don't have enough to do.
Yeah.
I need to build crazy stuff to live inside of a freaking derby hat for one weekend.
All right.
All right. I guess that's enough chatting. We had a main topic for tonight.
We do.
You've heard about this DevOps thing, right?
I think we've talked about it before.
We've talked about the DevOps thing in the past. I still can't call myself an expert on DevOps or, excuse me, even a active participant in DevOps, because there's a lot of it that just, quite frankly, some of it doesn't apply to what I do every day, even though I am a sysadmin. Not every sysadmin could benefit from DevOps, or at least not every application can benefit from DevOps. How's that? But a lot of the paradigms for automation and even containerization do apply. So it's still something I'm very interested in. And I can see some benefits from the security perspective, right? So I wanted to chat a little bit tonight about both how DevOps can benefit security and some of the caveats of DevOps for security, and maybe how we can mitigate some of those things. So
Right.
hopefully, Jason, you can give me a little more backup on the how to secure the DevOps, because I know you may be a little closer to actually dealing with it from day to day. Correct?
So, yep, on my side, technically I am doing DevOps, although we're still very much in the early stages. So there's a lot of old traditional sysadmin stuff going on, as well as moving into what is considered DevOps these days. So we're not a full DevOps shop. We're not doing the the Googles and the Amazons and et cetera. We're moving in that direction.
Good for you. So I wanted to attack how DevOps can benefit security first, because I think we can get through that relatively quickly, and then how to secure DevOps I think may actually be a deeper subject. Maybe I'm wrong, but so anyway, my vision here is that so in the old days, you've got a server with an application running on it.
Back in my day,
you young whippersnappers. You've got a server with an application running on it. The server is running whatever OS you choose. Just for the sake of familiarity, we'll say it's a Red Hat server. Okay, and then the application is, say, some Apache, PHP, MySQL app, right? Everyone's done this. We all know how this works. There's a reason there's an acronym called LAMP. So all of a sudden, security vulnerability comes out for either your operating system or your application. You need to figure out when you can afford the downtime to deploy your, the fix. You need to plan for an outage. You need to tell everyone about it. You need to take your server down. You need to apply the patch. You need to hope that things don't hopelessly blow up in your face. And then life is good for 3 weeks until there's another vulnerability, and then you have to do it all over again. Okay, so from my perspective, I feel like DevOps or Agile, I should say, microservices and fast deployments and automation can benefit that simply from the perspective of now my operating system is a container, or in its largest form, it's an image-based virtual machine, right, where I've got an application that is disconnected from the operating system. And when I want to deploy an operating system patch, I just build a new image of that operating system with the patch deployed. I do my testing with, the exact same code base I'm using in prod, and then, deploy that, test it, make sure everything's cool, and then just deploy it in my, high availability, ridiculously huge cluster of machines, in a rolling fashion, so that no one even notices an outage. And the same can be said for an application, right? You have your application tracked in some sort of an issue or some sort of a my mind is blanking. Must be the beer and the tiredness.
revisioning system.
Revision control system.
Yep.
So you push your change, and then the change deploys automatically to your various containers or VMs, or however you're running your application. And redundancy and automation cover everything for you. So to me, that sounds like a great world to live in, right? So, the weeks of planning and the outage and the notifications turn into, okay, I've got to change. I'm going to test it as best as I can in dev and stage, and then I'm going to roll it out to prod, and no one's even going to see an outage. That's like the unicorn world that I think that all you DevOps folks live in.
Yeah, there's it's not. I mean, it's not quite that rosy. So there's
it totally
a couple of
is.
different pieces.
Don't tarnish it.
So there's a couple different pieces. If we're talking strictly about the containers, application-wise, the reason that you can roll out a container so quickly after changing the underlying operating system is that the idea is you have created a build chain such that after the application is built, it goes through a battery of tests. And you're continually adding to those tests to ensure that what comes out the other end is as tested as any application that you build. So you have hit all the corner cases, you have done all your, everything. It's all in an automated fashion. And once it passes, it automatically pushes it out to your production network. So, you fix that new bug, and in the process, you create a test to verify that that new bug is fixed, adds it to the chain, off it goes, it pushes it, rolls it, and deploys it. The underlying operating system in a container, the rule of thumb, at least the one that I follow, is that the container operating system should be as minimal as possible. I'm a big fan of Alpine, which is
sort of the point of containers, though, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Make that minimal.
No, well,
small attack surface.
You would think so, but if you go to Docker Hub, there are some large containers.
Oh yeah,
Ubuntu is a.
Just base your containers on the thing right? It's got to be Ubuntu.
Right. Yep. No, Debian Jessie is one of the favorites, and people like to do well, not full, but like pretty decent size installs with Debian Jessie, and then put whatever their services on top of it. So the idea behind a microservice is you're supposed to be running, theoretically, a single daemon inside that container.
Right.
I think of it, a little bit more flexible. Depends on what the application is. I like identifying it as a self-contained application. So it could be a single daemon, or you could be talking about something a little bit bigger. So like GitLab ships a containered version of itself. The containered version of GitLab is not scalable per se, because it's still a single, everything runs in a single container.
Right.
So
everything,
there's work
when you say
to do
everything,
there.
you mean there's, application server plus application plus database? When you say everything?
Yes. I think you can break some of it out. But for the most part, yeah, everything's inside the same container. So when you get to actual microservices where it's just running a single daemon, the idea is that you can scale it out because you can just run multiples. From a security perspective, updating that underlying OS should be pretty simple. You run it through that battery of tests, everything passes, you're good to go. The other piece of security that some people miss is the actual host operating system itself. So what the Docker host itself is running, which also turns out not to be a big deal, because if you have multiple Docker hosts running, theoretically, you migrate the containers off of a host, upgrade that host, migrate back.
Yeah, but this is the same
for all of them.
This is the same deal that we got to when we started doing virtualization clusters.
Right. The difference with containers versus VMs is because if a microservice is properly written and properly designed, you can spin up a bunch of additional containers with that microservice on a different server.
Right.
And then shut down the ones that are on the server you're upgrading. And there is zero downtime.
containers don't necessarily migrate like VMs do.
Right.
VMs will move state from one hypervisor to another, and then the disk is shared. And then once the state
Right.
is moved from one to the other, it's no longer running on the old hypervisor.
Right.
Where with containers, it's more of a create and destroy, right? I create a
So
new
the
instance of
containers,
my application running on host B, and once I'm sure that's up and running, host A simply turns off the container. And some load
right.
balancer or something on the other side of that handles the transition from one to the other.
Yep. So you want to minimize the number of containers that are stateful.
Right.
So your databases or anything that has to write to disk to store things. The more containers that you can run that are stateless, the easier it is to migrate things and be scalable.
Right. So moving from the benefits of DevOps for security to the security implications of DevOps, which I think we've already started to make that transition. The biggest thing, the $1 million question in my mind is if I've got a billion microservices instead of one big monolithic app, right? And I'm making
Right.
changes frequently to those billion microservices, and they've all got APIs and they talk to each other and all that stuff. How do I protect myself from my developer simply making a mistake and deploying code that is vulnerable? That sounds like a really easy thing to do in this model.
So it's a microservice. So it's supposed to be simple.
Right.
If a service is simple, you should be able to put a sufficient number of test cases together that when it goes through the build process, it catches a lot of that. Now, I mean, when you get to the real world, that's not necessarily true, but it does help. Where I think the bigger attack surface is, I mean, yes, absolutely. I mean, if your microservices, if there's a bug in there, you can get in, etc. The biggest attack surface to me is the fact that now that I'm in a DevOps environment, there's a lot more tools at play. You've got Git servers for revision control. You've got your build servers. You've got, I mean, build servers for stuff like Jenkins or Travis or any of the other continuous integration tools. You've got a lot of custom built code for deploying services. There's a whole bunch of pieces that are added to the build chain that are running in an automated fashion that should be behind, firewalls and, a bunch of security prevent people from the outside to get in. But if you can obtain access to that, you're in the build chain. You can add code, modify code, etc., right in the main application. I mean, that's huge. So I mean that to me is if I was an attacker, that's what I would be after. Because if I can get myself a decent foothold inside that build chain, I own everything. I can do anything I want.
So there's testing that goes in to try to prevent bad code from getting into production, correct?
Right.
That's the way you
absolutely.
should be doing this, right? So with
sure.
With whatever sort of automation tool you're using, you'd build in unit tests, and those unit tests would try to protect against things, that are nasty, like say SQL injections or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, does that mean that the possible bad guy would also be subjected to those tests, or can they circumvent them?
Well,
or does that depend on how they're implemented? I suppose
I guess it depends on how things are implemented. So if you think about it, I want to deploy. I mean, think about this from a sysadmin perspective. I have a new application. I need to deploy on a server. What kind of permissions do I need to deploy that? So in a lot of cases, you're kind of a root user building the application and deploying that to the server and getting everything set up. You have a lot of power, a lot of power. When you get into the DevOps area, a DevOps arena, when you deploy an application, because it's deploying so many different types of applications, the amount of power and the number of permissions that you have is massive for whoever that DevOps, that automated user runs as. You need to be able to deploy just about any application. So yeah, I mean, you have a ton of access. You can get in there and change just about anything. If I want to bypass the test cases, that may be possible. If I can own the tool that runs the build chain, whether that's Jenkins or Travis or something that's built into, say, GitLab or any of the others, in a lot of cases, it's just changing a file. So, I mean, I love GitLab. GitLab is wonderful. Their continuous integration is literally a YAML file. All I have to do to bypass the testing is edit that file. The same for Travis. Jenkins is a little more convoluted. I'm not much of a fan. I don't think their permissions model and their security model is a little, not a little, it's very difficult to wrap your head around and kind of do things with. Maybe that makes it more secure, or potentially makes it more secure, but at the same time, it may not. So there's a lot of different areas that you can get into. What's that?
That's more of an obscurity thing, though, right?
No, I think it's
not even obscurity.
I think they have a lot of fine-grained permissions that you can do, which also gives you the ability to screw up in really big ways.
Awesome.
So in a lot of cases,
that's the way it goes.
Right. In my dealings with Jenkins so far, it's been enough of a pain that I've often thought, this kind of sucks. I just want to create a generic user and let everybody use it, because it's just such a pain to set everything up. GitLab makes it a little nicer, because it's the owner, whoever can commit to the repository can modify the CI file, the YAML file for it, that does all the integration stuff.
So that's part of the Git repo.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It's just the build file it's just a text file.
So what we're really getting down to here is this is all in the Git repo. It comes down to things like Git hooks and
yep.
Files that feed back into your automation tools. Right.
Exactly.
So the way to make that better is to simply, well, I shouldn't say simply, but is to protect your Git repository with your life. It's what it comes down to, right?
Well, I mean, you should be anyway. That's your
yeah, obviously.
Code, so.
Obviously. So I mean, what about with? Well, I guess that wouldn't really apply. So what if I'm deploying a community open source project, and maybe I'm pulling from like a GitHub upstream?
You would probably be pulling that into whatever your build tool is.
Yeah, I'd imagine I'd be pulling that into a local repo, and then the local repo is mine, and no one but me can commit to it.
Right, but if you're pulling it in an automated fashion, then you're sort of at the mercy of your upstream. If they submit bad code, you're going to end up with bad code.
Yeah, but I mean that's the mercy of. Excuse me. That's the problem with really any open source project. I mean, if there's kernel vulnerabilities in my RHEL kernel, I'm at the mercy of the kernel developers.
Right.
Right. Same goes for Drupal or WordPress or any pick your large upstream here.
Right.
Right.
Yep. There is a level of trust. So I mean, if in that case, I would say that maybe you should not be pulling it in an automated fashion. Maybe you should be, see, I'm trying to remember how this works. You create a branch, you pull in the new code, you merge the branch in, you fix all the whatever comes up, and then, then you build from there, test, and off you go. The other way to deal with some of the security stuff is in some environments, and this doesn't work for everybody, but in some places it works really well. you put gating factors in. So I can build and test and push to the development environment 24/7 as many times as I want. If I want to push that same code into whatever the next environment is, integration stage, whatever term you want to use for it, I have to have sign off from a certain number of people. Or I have to, I can only do that so many times in a certain time period. I mean, you put gating factors in. And then for production, you have to have sign off from all these people, or it has to pass these certain tests or whatever. And you take that power out of the hands of the individual developer, and you put gating factors in that are automated. And it helps a bunch with the security side of things. Again, unless they can get into your build chain and they can get into those tools that are controlling the gates.
Yeah, right. I mean, obviously, if someone can get into your Git repo and make changes at that level, you've got problems.
Right. So, if somebody jumped on your download server and uploaded a malicious version of your software that automatically went out to your users,
how in the world could that ever happen?
It happens.
Never. I've never heard of that. Not like half an hour ago when we talked about it in the news.
Right. So having an external system that does some sort of checking, whether that's hash checking or whatever, but is external to what you're doing is a benefit. I mean, maybe you get attacked and something gets compromised, and you end up with bad code for an hour before the check happens. But at least something is checking, because otherwise you could end up with bad code and it lasts forever.
Yeah.
Unless you do some sort of code review and go scratch your head and try to figure out where that came from. And depending on your,
why is that trying to send data off to Russia? It's weird.
Right. And depending on your revision system,
right.
you may be able to overwrite the comments, overwrite those commits that make it look like it never happened. So, Git has those tools available to it. They're not intended to be used in a malicious way, but cars aren't intended to be used to run people over. It happens.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the story of everything that is abused in any way.
Yep. Exactly.
whether it's cars, code, or airplanes, right?
Right. I mean, look, having ultrasonic sounds out there that can be used to interact with devices could be very beneficial, or it could track you. And
you're just calling back to all the news, aren't you?
I'm trying. It's a thing. It's a new thing. I'm giving it a shot. See what happens.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So, in a true DevOps world, you've got microservices, and microservices use APIs to communicate with each other. So the APIs, I'd assume, would also be a pretty big attack vector, correct?
They could be. What I find really neat about how Docker works is you can actually use, it depends on what framework you're using, but you can have the communication between microservices isolated away on separate networks or virtual networks or whatever you want to call them, that are secured and encrypted. And I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to do this, so that you can take communication between microservices and you don't have to do the implementation of the security. So say for instance, you have one service that talks to another over some sort of a REST API using HTTP. Instead of having to go through and put in the HTTPS and set up the certificates and et cetera, you can have Docker create a secure channel from that container to the other container on a private Docker network that is not accessible by the outside world.
Sounds like a pretty good way to secure it.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Now, obviously, if you're going between physical servers, there is some sort of communication channel there that could theoretically be tapped into. But Docker itself is designed to prevent you from getting into that network unless you're part of that network already. If that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. So unless you're local to the Docker system, or perhaps local to the overall network that the Docker systems communicate over, then you shouldn't be able to access that channel. Is that what you're getting at? Are you still there? I think we lost Jason, folks. So anybody who's bothering to watch live, if you can still see me, I'm trying to get Jason back on. Hey, look! He's rejoined. Now there's 2 Jasons. Look at that! He's back. Can you hear me?
Internet.
Yay, internet. Okay, so I don't know how much of the last
back.
comment you got.
I didn't hear you at all. I was chatting about things, and then you stopped talking.
All right, so you were saying about how network back channels and whatnot would work. So I responded with, what was it? Oh, so what you were trying to say was if an attacker was local to your networks, they could theoretically read that back channel conversation, right? Like if they had compromised things to the point where they could read whatever network your Docker hosts were communicating on back channel, then they might be able to compromise your APIs. That's kind of where we were, I think, when you froze.
Maybe. I mean, Docker, so again, there's a bunch of different implementations. So it depends on whether you're using things like Calico or using Flannel or any of these Docker plugins for networking. Some of them, and I think vanilla Docker does this by default now. When you connect from one container to another, that communication is automatically encrypted. So yes, you could listen to the traffic, but you'd have to decrypt it. So the way to, and I'd have to test this because I don't know if this would work. The only way that I can think of to get in there without having to play decryption games and man-in-the-middle stuff would be to have your own container that's on that same network and listen on that network. But I'm betting that Docker is probably unicasting everything instead of, there may be broadcasts here and there, but I'm pretty sure the unicast traffic is going to bypass everything.
So you probably, unless you compromise the Docker host, you wouldn't be able to get into this network, is what you're getting at. Or split up your own Docker host that's on the same, cluster or whatever. Sorry about that.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And at that point, I mean, again, this is like, you have to judge for the level of risk that you can actually compensate for, right? So, I mean, a compromised Docker host is a big deal.
Right. Really, absolutely.
Really big deal.
But this is what really excites me. Think about the benefits of this. You can take a service and you can create a rock solid API that you can talk to back and forth. And all you have to worry about is the API, and just run it on vanilla Nginx or Apache or generic HTTP. Don't worry about SSL. Don't worry about encryption. Just run it plain text. And when you put it inside the Docker container, you tell it, this communication happens over this specific network, and that network is encrypted. Let Docker handle the encryption for you.
So the back
you
channel
don't have to
APIs
implement any of it.
Sort of encrypted by default.
Right. And then if you handle it that way, and you trust that Docker is going to spend the time to make sure that that encryption is solid, and you don't have to do it, I mean, you're both sort of working in tandem here to make sure that the overall security of that is much higher. You spend all your time to perfect those APIs, make sure everything's secure in that manner. They spend all their time ensuring that the encryption is secure and making sure that that's done. You combine the two together, you get a fully encrypted, highly secure API on a back channel that theoretically you can't get to over the network.
It's good stuff.
Take just a regular web app that you want to deploy to the masses. You can set up an Nginx proxy and put all your SSL on that, and just do straight vanilla HTTP to the back end, and not worry about it. There's a lot of benefits to that, and that's really kind of cool. I mean, that reduces the amount of certificate handling you have to do, and the overhead of that, and it's really nice. So
that's all.
Go ahead.
That's all back channel API stuff.
That's just back channel communications.
Right. So what about cases where this API is actually accessible to the end user? Like, say, in the case of a mobile app, or some sort of a client that you're running on your machine that talks to an API.
Security there is
that sort of changes the ballgame.
It is today. That doesn't really change a whole lot. I mean, your API should still be.
It changes it in that it's no longer protected by Docker. Now it's protected by standard web technologies. Right.
Right. Yep. That's exactly. So it's the same. It's the same as developing an API that you're going to put out there on a VM or on bare metal. You still have to secure it. You have to come up with the proper API. You have to make sure that your corner cases are handled, etc. So Docker doesn't help there, although when you get into the DevOps methodology, right?
At that point, it's a public web service, not a back channel web service. So you have to protect it in the ways you normally protect it. So if it's talking to like a mobile app or whatever, there need to be some sort of a key exchange.
Yep.
Something. Or you just need to make your API solid enough that if somebody does try to attack it in some way, it just compensates, I suppose.
Right. Exactly. So the only benefit I can see there on the DevOps side for something like that is that if there is something that's shown to be if there's a compromise that's available, in that you can rapidly patch and release to fix it. So there are companies such as Amazon that do tens of thousands of releases a day,
right,
through the whole DevOps chain right out to production.
I can't even imagine having an application that I'd have to modify that frequently.
Yeah, well,
that sounds like a nightmare. Just an absolute nightmare.
I mean, that's not necessarily the same application. It could be, 10,000 different applications.
Tons of pieces of application, yeah.
Right.
But still, I mean, on the whole, it comprises one application. It's a bunch of microservices that comprise an application, which is the Amazon Web Store.
Right. Chances are that those changes are cosmetic. I mean, it's probably not.
Yeah, right. It's
Major
like,
core
this
changes.
button needs to be a different color, so here's a change. We're just going to deploy it because DevOps.
Right. The other thing that you can do with I mean, it's not security related per se, but you can do pretty crazy A/B testing with it. You deploy 2 different versions of the Docker container, and you use the load balancer to push people to one or the other, and then you do your testing that way.
Right.
So that's done a lot. Google does that constantly. Amazon does that constantly.
I read somewhere that Facebook did this. Sort of.
Yeah, they probably do too.
They released a version of their app that was actually buggy, and they wanted to see if people left because of it, or if they just dealt with the inconsistency.
I have so many users. I'm going to purposely release a buggy app just to see if I can get people to go away.
I'm just going to deploy a buggy app to them and see if they leave. Crazy stuff. Crazy.
Well,
I know how you feel about Facebook, so that just I thought you'd get a kick out of that.
We're the best of friends.
Yay, friends. All right. I think we've covered the DevOps for security.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely interested in hearing more about what people are doing out there.
Yeah.
I'm looking to incorporate what I can into our own chain. For me, it's my job is to ensure that obviously, as a sysadmin, I need to make sure the whole chain and the app and everything else is secure as much as possible. But to me, these days, ensuring that the build chain itself is secure, and that moving from environment to environment is smooth and flawless. I mean, that's really what we're after. And I think the security of the application itself, and arguably the security of the underlying OS in the container, is more on the developer these days. Although the container security is, the OS for the container kind of gets updated. It depends on how tight you're going to be on the controls, but you can have that update pretty frequently.
Well, that depends on redeploying, though, correct?
Right.
So yeah, the container that I pulled in order to build my application may be getting updates pretty frequently, but unless I'm redeploying my container, I'm not getting those updates.
Right. Right, but you can throw a tool in there that says, "Hey, look for exploits for this OS in these types of situations," or whatever. And there's actually a bunch of tools out there that do that. And then based on that feedback, you can have it automatically rebuild with that problem has been mitigated in the latest version.
So, if your build tests are solid, then you could just say that, I'm going to rebuild every 6 hours. Right.
You could do that. Well, you don't need to do that though. So you go through and you say, you build your app whenever a new version of the app comes out. You know that at that time, app version 1.5 is running on, say, Alpine 3.4. Okay, good to go. And you push it out. There's no need to rebuild every 6 hours because your application version hasn't changed.
Right.
So what you do is you monitor the security for all of the dependencies for your application, as well as all the dependencies of the OS that you're running. And if you have say, for instance, you're using, I don't know, let's just say Log4j. Say you're using a Java app, and some major vulnerability comes out in Log4j that allows people to remotely execute whatever. It's a high vulnerability. You don't have to rewrite anything in your application per se. You just have to rebuild on the latest version of Log4j. So at that point, you can say, "Uh-oh, there's an alert. It's a high vulnerability. there is a fix, and all this is automated, by the way. There is a fix. Okay, rebuild the application with that new version and deploy it. And it has automatically done all of this for you. You didn't have to rebuild every 6 hours. It just happened that, you know, you're checking you're getting active alerts from, I don't know, a bunch of the security news feeds. And that's one of the alerts that came in. And you can do the same thing for the OS. So you find out that Bash 4.1 or whatever version has a bug in it, and you can update it. Although, arguably, for a true microservice, you don't want to have a shell, so you wouldn't include anything like Bash. But
right,
you know, however you decide to build.
Minimalization of your attack footprint.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of you're going to have to make choices on how you build things. And when you're really, really comfortable, maybe you take Bash out. I mean, right now I still have a shell in there because I need to access things and be able to do stuff.
Right.
Maybe at some point we pull the shell out and we decide that we're not going to have that anymore, and you reduce your attack surface even more. Lots of choices. But you really need to be familiar with just like any sysadmin, anything, you really need to be familiar with what you're working with in order to make those sorts of decisions.
All right. Well, I think we've covered this pretty well. Unless you got some more thoughts you want to get out there?
No, not at the moment. I would love feedback though, and find out what other people are thinking.
Absolutely.
How other people are dealing with things.
Folks, DevOps is a very quickly evolving space, and I don't think either of us would consider ourselves experts on this subject. We're both definitely experienced sysadmins, and we're applying that to, the new world that is DevOps. So, I mean, we welcome feedback. podcast@ironsysadmin.com will get to both of us. If you think we said something incorrectly, or if you'd like to simply expand on anything we talked about, please send us an email or look us up on Twitter @ironsysadmin, and hit us up that way, and we'll be happy to chat about it. Maybe it'll turn into a more expanded episode about DevOps and security. Maybe we'll just revisit this whole thing.
Yep, and if you happen to be available every other Monday, we can chat live.
Absolutely,
live chat thing.
Absolutely, we're quite open to bringing on guests, sort of like we did with John a couple weeks ago. Which, as I mentioned last time around, we're gonna try to revisit that, bring him back on to talk about some more OpenStack stuff. But we're definitely open to more either interviews or just guests, to chat about, subject matter experts and whatnot. So yeah. If you are someone who knows more about DevOps than we do, just from listening to us banter about DevOps, please let us know. We could always bring you on the show and have a more informed conversation. It'll help both of us out. It'll help the show out, and that'd be awesome.
Yep, agreed. And apologies for the low energy tonight. It's been a number of days of nonstop. I hurt in places I didn't even know you could hurt.
Yeah, I've had a crazy busy couple of weeks as well. So I think this episode may suffer because of it, but I think it turned out okay.
Yes.
So all right,
I'm a sysadmin, not a mover.
So on that note, I think we're going to try to close up for tonight. Where can you find us? So if you want to look up our website, which is currently still just a redirect to my own site, which will get you to the podcast feed, it's www.ironsysadmin.com. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/ironsysadmin. On YouTube, I'm not going to recite this because it's a ridiculously long link, but youtube.com, just go search for Iron Sysadmin Podcast. You'll find us. Twitter.com/ironsysadmin. You can find us on Apple iTunes and on Stitcher, and I'm probably missing something, but that's all I can remember at the moment.
I'm on Twitter.
Yeah, the two of us are on Twitter. I'm at Gangriff. You can hit me up directly. Go right ahead. Have fun. And
I'm
Jason?
at Xenophage.
Xenophage.
There are no J's in it.
There are no J's. Awesome. It's a silent J, maybe.
No, not even a silent one.
Not even a silent J. That's Silent Bob, right? J and
Right.
Silent Bob.
Yes.
Now we're going to hit with copyright infringement from Kevin Smith. He doesn't seem like the sort that might do that.
No, I don't think so.
All right. I think we're both tired. We're going to call it a night. Here comes the outro music. Night, everybody.
Good night.